I would like to talk about how I worked on my developer portfolio and some tricks and things that might be helpful for you too in considering when you're just starting out or maybe want to improve it. Most of this video is going to be about Lefdili, who sent me GitHub repository, so we can have a look there and see what we can maybe improve and how you can use your GitHub repositories for your portfolio. In case you don't know me, I'm Karen. I have a PhD in physics and I'm a self-taught iOS developer. I recently went through the job interview process in Germany, so I will discuss this from my experience, which might be very different from the job market in the US. And I just want to give you some insights of what I found during this process. I hope there's some useful information in there that helps you to land your next job. So first I'm going to go a little bit about the idea and the process, and then we have a look at Lefdili's GitHub repositories and discussing a little bit how to write the readme. I also show you some other examples, and then I will have a look at the code. I prepared this page on my GitHub, and you can find the link in the description. So this is just a summary that I started for iOS development. And here there's more information under this section about the portfolio. When I was preparing my portfolio, I found this one YouTube tutorial very helpful because he's just discussing how you can structure your portfolio website. The main part of this portfolio website is the projects that you put on them. When you start or you want to add more projects or features, or you want to improve it, the question is, what projects should we build? And the best idea, because what this portfolio is supposed to do is make sure that you demonstrate the skills that are required for the jobs you're applying for. So we need to check the requirements of the job boards that you're looking for. This might be different if you're looking for a senior job than a junior, or depending on the time frame, or maybe you have different ambitions for what kind of projects you want to work for. Maybe you're interested more games, maybe macOS apps, or WatchOS in the health sector, or for cryptocurrency, for example. So basically, what I did was I went on Indeed or whatever job board you want, and then you just look for iOS developer in your area, and then look under the list of key qualifications. In this case, you already see one of the main point is the language Swift, up to date with UIKit, and you see a lot of these buzzwords that are quite important, like analytic thinking, problem solving, communication. You can go through a couple of these requirements and just collect them, like I did here. For example, you should be able to work with Xcode, auto layout. For most of them, they didn't say UIKit, but if you see auto layout or interface builder, it means UIKit. Then something like RESTful APIs is very popular. Some design patterns like MVC, MVVM. You can also see ARKit, user authentication, database working, or something like clean code, Sketch. This is design software, or this management software is like Jira. So you basically collect them and then decide on the priority. If you do that for your skill level, you directly see what is important, and you should focus on the most important ones and keep this list, because this is the buzzwords or the keywords that we have to sprinkle in our application and on our portfolio. Because when they go through, they are looking for, knows UIKit, check, Swift UI, check, unit tests, code reviews, check. Every hiring manager will go through your application and they will look for these keywords that they put in the job description. The other advantage of having this list is that you're more focused towards learning what's required for the job, and that you have more goal to work towards. So personally, I think it's quite a good motivation to do this if you're halfway through your learning process, because it's like you see a clear structure ahead, especially if you start deciding on the projects that you want to build and demo the skills. That's the point. Once you have these lists, and you should be at least checking what they mean and what they're used for, then you have to decide on the projects that you want to build. For each project, this project should not have a super amazing app idea, it's actually more beneficial for you if they're easy to understand, because then the person who sees them knows directly what this app's supposed to do. And that just helps you to get going. So the person who sees this, who wants to decide what kind of developer you are, they directly see, okay, how is this and this feature implemented and this done. For example, I have one YouTube series about REST APIs. This is a very important topic. Also in the sense that you might get, half of the time you get assignments during your job interview process, they are related to REST APIs. So it's a super useful project to have. For example, you can demo in this project using SwiftUI or UIKit what kind of design patterns, MVVM. Are you unit testing? Which backend service you're using? Demonstrating JSON decoding, error handling, run central dispatch. Whatever you do, make just a list, because when they ask you, also during the assignment, during the job interview, they might ask you what kind of design patterns did you use and why did you use them. It's good to think about this before, because answering this kind of questions can give you a lot of bonus points, and you can get them very easily by being able to talk about it, to highlight what you're actually capable of. So in the example project that I built, I used the cat API to show cats and images, because some of them, like showing images in a collection view with search fields and stuff, is quite useful. It's a very common task. The second project idea is some kind of productivity app. This is again something that the company you're trying to apply is used to, because they also want to be more productive, to work better. So one thing that is also in the Coding Foundry tutorial that I mentioned earlier was that they're building so this is for web development, but he suggested to build a bug tracker. You can also think of Trello, or from the Apple documentation, there's the Scrum Dinger. Some kind of Scrum project is nice, especially if you see here in the job requirements, because some of the skills it's hard to demo. If you have this kind of productivity collaboration app, you're showing interest that you want to actually collaborate with others, and then you want to work in a team environment and communicate. Sometimes they talk about agile mindset. So this one has also REST APIs, core data is a plus. For example, this one has a work with other engineers on a collaborative agile team to deliver code on an ongoing basis. And if you have some kind of productivity app, you're showing that you care about this topic, and then you're trying to solve it. So it's a different way of demoing this skill. The good thing about this kind of bug tracker or Trello apps is that you can demonstrate, because it's a collaborative app, you need to use some kind of sharing feature. For example, you can use Firebase and show a login screen, so user authentication. You can have user roles and access rights, for example, admin or basic user. What the app actually does, what the data is, doesn't have to be that specific. We are just trying to find projects that demonstrate some of these skill requirements. When I said demonstrate the skill requirements, I want to make sure that you put the keywords from the requirement in the GitHub readme and also on your portfolio. You can put more on the GitHub because you have for each of these projects more space. For the portfolio, you can really focus on some of these keywords. So first of all, you should have a readme on your GitHub with a short description of the app. Some images, GIFs are even nicer, just so the people who see this GitHub know directly what it does. There's a big difference between the GitHub readme and the App Store description. The App Store description is for people who want to use it, so they want to have the features. The GitHub repository should show what tech stack you used. For example, core data, core animation, UIKit, SwiftUI, UI search controller, patterns like MVVM, combine, did you use unit testing, localization, core ML? If you write this description of the project, you should show a screen maybe and say which features did you use, which tech did you use. The other thing is, sometimes they don't even download the projects, but in case you have some special setup necessary, you should write a short instructions to installation. For example, if it's a pod file, Maybe you need to connect to a Firebase endpoint or something. Or if you work with REST API, say which API you use and a link to the description of this API. And some other informations like if you use third-party libraries, what did you use, why did you use it, and how did you use it. It's completely fine if you use them. It's just nicer for me as a reader. It makes it faster for me to read it. And the same is true for the hiring manager. From the requirements of the project, you should have a good-looking UI. This helps you for your portfolio, having a good-looking portfolio. You should follow the human interface guidelines, how to use navigation views, how to push, what is a tab, how to use tab views, to not use hamburger menus because this is Android specific. The project should build. You shouldn't have bugs or crashes, at least not for the main part of your application. Take advantage in case you're having some nice bonus features like nicer loading animations, maybe you're having good looking images for empty states or error feedbacks. Make sure to include them and highlight them in the README and on your portfolio website. Then there are some things that concern the code quality. So it's always good to write clean code and highlight that you want to write clean code. I know it's not the easiest to implement. From a personal experience, please make it more simple. I did that once that I made it very complicated and that did not go well. Make your code simple. Simple doesn't mean it's bad. Simple means it's simple to read and it feels simple. The structure feels simple because you don't need to think too much of why this is structured like this. For example, don't use too many view models with dependencies where it's really hard to understand what exact task each of this view model has. It's better to stay simple and have code that is readable. Because you have to think of whoever is looking at your code in the end, they just want to know they can work with the code you're writing. That it fits how they would write code, so you would understand each other's code. It's nothing against the quality of your code, it's simple basic rules of communication of how to write code. So they try to figure out, can they understand your code? Is it logic for them? Is it consistent, structured? For example, in order to improve readability, you should follow standard naming conventions for classes, functions, and variables. They should be descriptive and say what they do. If you end up writing a lot of comments, this might be you might intend this as good, but the other coder might not see it like this because in the end it means they have to read more and it takes them longer to understand your code. Whereas it's short and descriptive, the names of the functions, if they are descriptive enough, you don't need to have so much comments. So focus on the naming of your code to make it more readable. Don't have a lot of uncommented code because it's just, especially sometimes if you try things, just take it out. This is clutter and makes it harder for the other person to understand your code. If you can implement dries, don't repeat yourself. That means don't repeat the same code snippets all over again. Try to make it modular. You should also try to not have too many typos. I have a problem with this too. I understand, but it's just some people are very sensitive to this. And also the same is typos in your code for names or functions or classes and also for the file names and the folder names. There has to be a consistent structure in your project. Simply because if you have a small project as your portfolio project with, 20 files, if it's not structured super well, you can still get away with this. But if you have hundreds of files, being very consistent makes a huge difference. So the idea behind this, we're just trying to demonstrate the skills we have and make it as easy as possible for the reviewer, for the hiring person to understand if we have the skills, what we have learned, and how capable are we. This is one of my GitHub repositories, which I actually use for a YouTube tutorial, so it's not the best. The GitHub doesn't need to be huge, just very fast to the point. So for example, here I'm saying the example API is the cat API, the link to this API. This demo is using REST API with SwiftUI. And then here a link to my YouTube channel that you were just seeing. But the main point is you see here what I'm considering. You should also do this. For example, working with the web, with JSON, fetching data with URL session. Didn't say this. How to parse JSON with, for example, Codable protocol. How to consume this in the views and loading images. And then here's some demo images. For example, also with these error messages and then try again. You probably should add a little bit more text than I did. Here's another one of mine. This is a Slipbox app. Starting with to set up this project, because I used here iCloud Sync. Then what is the idea behind this project? How's the UI looking like? Some of the features. For example, here the toolbar modifier, the window group, that I'm using core data, how I do the navigation, that this is a cross-platform app for macOS and iOS. So it doesn't need to be a lot. Here I'm even saying which files to look at. This is also nice, because then the person doesn't need to click for your project too much. The additional benefit of having this nice readme with the bullet points that you want to demo in the images here is that you can directly extract this for your portfolio website. Because there you can just list the projects with maybe just one of these images and then say what tech stack did you use. Here I used SwiftUI for macOS, core data with iCloud for syncing. And then if they want to learn more, they go to the GitHub repository and see more of a description. And they can also directly see then the code in these examples. Starting by getting a nice readme helps you to faster write than the portfolio website. Or it goes a little bit hand in hand. Where the portfolio website is more condensed, showcasing of your projects that I have been working on. This is now Lefdili's first project, which is a radio app. Radio Arabic countries. And then here comes the features. And for example, listen to FM stations via web radio. Not sure if web radio is an API, because it doesn't say. Then you can play radio in the background. Add stations to favorites. These are all features that are interesting for the end user. You would write this if you have published in the App Store. Someone who wants to check if they want to hire you would care more about how you implemented this. What tech stack did you use? For example, when you say add stations to favorite, how do you save them? How do you structure this? Do you have an extra view model where you do this? Do you save this to user defaults, to disk, or on a server? You can leave this list in here, just add a lot more about the tech stack. For example, here in the screenshots, you have the list of the screenshots, which is already quite good to have the screenshots. But maybe for each of the screenshots have a little description of what it does and what are you using in these ones. You can also discuss things like, do you have a navigation view, tab view, or here in this case where you see the flags, you probably use a UI collection view with maybe custom UI view cells. That would be a very good feature to mention here, that you actually know how to do this. The only thing is, with the layout, you might need to check if you can change the aspect ratio, because flags shouldn't be 1:1 aspect ratio, it's more like a 2:3. So might change that. One problem with the screenshots right now is that I'm not sure how I go from one to the other and how this is connected. If you want, you can use GIFs. So we can use the simulator for making screenshots with the screenshot button. Under File, you can use the Record Screen or Command R. Now my button here on the top right changed. If I press here and do something in my app and then finish my recording, this right-clicking gives me now the option to save as animated GIF. So if you have a look at this GIF file, I can play this and see what I did. So for example, you can maybe show the main screen and navigate to detail, start playing. It doesn't have a sound, but at least you see what's going on, the navigation working. These GIF files can be dropped in your projects. For example, I did this in one of my projects where I was using the matching your geometry effect in SwiftUI. These are all animations, so obviously I need to... Static image is not going to show what this does. So here you see one of these animated GIFs with this kind of hero animations and just different kinds of demonstrations of animations. This kind of GIFs are nice for the GitHub repo and also for your portfolio website. For this repo, just write a little bit more what each screen does, how you go from which screen, and what tech stack you're using. Because in the end, you can use this for your portfolio website, where you condense down each of these portfolio projects from your GitHub, saying, okay, this is what maybe showing one screen only. This is the short idea of this app, like this one sentence here. And then what you used, REST APIs, some sound playing, saving to disk. Or some other things that you should mention is if you have pod files, why are you using this kind of frameworks? What are you doing with Firebase Analytics? Why did you choose AlmoFire and not URL session? If you do a little bit more work for your README now, it helps you with your portfolio website. Just have a look at the other app for now. So this is an image snapper with a link to the App Store, which is quite useful. Here you're making images, so you're probably working with the camera roll, and you should check how you save photos. Please mention how you're saving it to the photo library, what you're using, how do you share it with WhatsApp. As an example, I'm just showing you my portfolio. It's not the most amazing design. So I was just trying to highlight some of the features. For example, I have a published app in the App Store, and I wanted to demonstrate that I know Sketch or some design software. For example, how did I make my app icon? Or here this App Store page designs. It's actually really nice to use Sketch because you get a lot of design resources that are for free, like this iPad mockup or for the iPhone. So you can easily get these frames around it. Sometimes just adding the mockup, the device frame around it makes the app already looking a lot more interesting and real. In my case, I did it reverse. I've had all the projects and I was just looking of which project would be useful to put on the portfolio, just to demonstrate a couple of these requirements from the jobs. For example, I show here the subscription view. We can buy the monthly subscription and the yearly subscriptions. So I mentioned I'm using a freemium model and I'm do the in-app purchases with RevenueCat. How do I do the user authentication Firebase? How do I share data with Realm Sync? Or if you have some more UI related features, like in this case, I have a UI collection view here on the side for this flow layout. Actually, I do have custom cells for this. I probably should have mentioned this. I use drag and drop. This is the PK canvas. I use some custom gestures. Here, this is some GIFs for animations. This is actually some UI kit dynamics behavior, because I could use some physics-based animations, so that made me very happy. Or if you do some adaptation, maybe for different screen sizes, dark mode, accessibility, dynamic font. In my case, I had one big project, so I just picked a couple of the features that might show off a little bit. And down here, the links for some of the smaller projects or the coding challenges category probably, showing off for different things. For example, here, core data, one app with core data and CloudKit. Then here, some combined with SwiftUI, with URL session. So this was networking, unit testing, dependency injections. I did add some links to my YouTube. I probably could have just showed the embedded video here. The reason why I used these YouTube links was just to demonstrate different topics. For example, here the coding review with the best practices, or this kind of design patterns with MVVM that I know what to look for. I mentioned the unit tests, but this kind of MVVM I could have also mentioned for my main project. The main thing is I did not focus on features as what you would put in the App Store for the app users. I wrote this for people who understand code, iOS development, to know what I actually used. Both of the projects from Lefdili look already very promising. You can just add more description here to show off more, because this readme doesn't reflect what you actually have in the project. So let's have a look at the Arab radio. I look at this because it looks bigger. Okay, now I open the Arab radio that Lefdili made. I haven't actually looked at this before. So let's see if it builds. I have very good hopes because it's published in the App Store. I'm running the app now. And the first thing is I see the allow notifications. You might, this is just from a user's perspective, wait a little bit for this. Because some people, when they launch an application and they directly have to allow something, it might put them off a little bit. I see you actually used your ad. That's going to be interesting to have a look. I have 4 countries. This is the app tracking. How do I get back? Wait, where am I? Change country. Okay. I got a little bit confused from the user experience, because the first screen that I saw was this. And in this case, this is just personal preference with the user experience. I would probably use here a sheet, just an overlay, and not a full screen. Also, I would like to have here a cancel action, because now it looked like you push to a detail, but I can actually not go back. So just probably have a look at the navigation stack. Let's see. Okay, this seems to work. What's this? Wait. Dismiss. In this case, I think I would have preferred a navigation detail view to push from here and not an overlay. Okay, I guess I can press here. Okay, this probably means now this is a favorite. And I can search for... This looks like a search navigation view control, search view controller thingy, because it has the nice animations. The search does work. And when I scroll down, I see that these icons come, so I'm guessing these are loaded. It feels very smooth. Listen only on Wi-Fi. Where is my saved stations? Maybe not this. Okay. I'm getting confused with the icons here in the navigation. So maybe you should have a look at the human interface guidelines. I'm telling this because Lefdili published this in the App Store, so having a better user experience helps with that. It might not be so important. It actually is important for the jobs. Okay, now I have here iOS design themes, app architecture. This is a lot of reading. Just trying to figure out where it is. For example, you can read about how do you do onboarding. I didn't see an onboarding sequence for the app. How do you show loading, navigation? Okay, now we have here, it's maybe not so visible. There's 2 different kinds of navigation. Hierarchical navigation. This is going from a first view, the master view, to a detail to another detail. This is the style of navigation views. And then we have a flat hierarchy. if you have categories between different views. This is usually done with tab views. Yours felt a little bit like this. Things go in weird places. Just need to go to tab bars. For the iPhone, tab bars are very common. So we have here 4 different main categories: photos, memories, shared, albums. I would recommend having a look at the standard apps. I don't have my... Okay, this like the music app. Or here the photo albums. So you have here all folders, yours, albums, and search. So for your app, I would recommend having a tab bar on the bottom with one for the settings, where you can choose the countries. One view where you search, like you have it here with all of them. And one with the favorites. Because now I have to filter this here. So you would have 3 different tabs down here. Maybe the 4th one with the recorded files. This would improve the user experience of this app a lot. And you would go with the standard UX design principles. Otherwise, the app is working perfectly fine. The features works. I know reading through the human interface guidelines is a lot of reading. But it does help if you want to make apps. Personally, for me, one of the hardest parts if you want to make your own app is UX design. So just have search through this. Okay, now that I have this, just have a look at the app. And so we have here deployment infos of iOS 13, device orientation portrait. I'm not sure if you can make it work in upside down, landscape left and landscape right. That would be actually nice. It works for the iPhone and the iPad. I'm guessing the UI doesn't look differently for the iPad. Just going to try. Okay, the permission us again. So, yeah, it does look the same. But there's nothing wrong with it because it's functional enough. I'm just going to leave the iOS version on the right so I know how to read this. Okay, looking at the main project folder, you have here the Google Service Info plist in there. I'm guessing this is for the analytics. Okay, you don't have any launch screen in there. You might just put in a nice icon or image in your app icon. Because otherwise having a white screen for a long time is a less good user experience. You're actually using core data for saving this. You definitely should mention this in the GitHub repo. Okay, so I have one entity with country. You have one entity with country, image, status, title, and the stations. Okay, we have to look at how you use this and one relationship. It's definitely good to have one relationship in there with a destination country. Delete will nullify. Yes, because if you delete a station, the country shouldn't be deleted. And the type is to 1. One station has one country. Just going to go for the inverse. This has a type to 1. I'm not really sure why, because you can have multiple stations per country. Again, delete will nullify. Maybe I have to look at this more. Then the assets, you didn't put an accent color. That you definitely should do. The app icon, the radio images, the icons. I'm not really sure why you have an icon for reset. And dismiss. The other ones are quite... It's very good that you have custom icons for this. Oh, you have an extra folder with the colors. But I don't see your accent color here. Maybe I guess this is the navbar. These buttons also don't look like... The UI looks a little bit out of date. Doesn't look too modern. Then you have localizations in English, French, and Arab. Again, something that you should mention in your GitHub. I have the scene delegate, where you customize the appearance of the navigation bar. And when you launch the application, depending on if we store the selected country in the user defaults, we show a different view controllers. I would like to see how you actually switch back once I selected one of these. If you want to improve this implementation a little bit more, it's just a suggestion, you can have a look at coordinator patterns. Because then this which navigation to use at which situation is placed in a separate file, the coordinator. It's a nice pattern and is getting very popular. So the scene delegate is probably not doing... yeah, this is the Firebase and the Google AdSense setup. And the messaging, these are not used. Yes, the notification. This is, when the application launches, this is because this is why I directly was asked for the notification to allow this. Okay, I go back to the scene delegate to check which view controllers I have to look at. And the first one is my custom navigation controller. And the other one is the country list controller with a custom navigation controller. Okay, let's have a look at the custom. I jump to definition. This is... okay. Sorry, I was confused because I didn't know I'm still in the scene delegate file. You're only setting here the UI status bar style. You can do this. Maybe you can put this somehow together with the navigation bar appearance and place this in a separate file. So I know which class, your custom navigation class or coordinator class. Maybe that's going to help solve your problem. You can do all this setup of your styling and deciding which navigation view controller to show. Okay, I don't need to look at the custom navigation controller. Okay, let's go for the country, for the view controller. So I have here the country list view controller, list controller, or the radio list controller. Okay, so I was looking for the collection view and I didn't see that this is actually subclassing from UI collection view controller, which means that it automatically has a collection view set up with the right auto layout constraint, because there's also no interface, no storyboard. I have to go to change country. This is this view controller. So we have, this must be one header country list with this styling. So I would like to know. So we are getting our countries from our core data manager shared fetch countries. Then I have a banner manager. Here in the view that will appear calling reload data. You might want to use the diffable data source. And one thing is, because this data may come back a little bit later, maybe you can work with escaping closures. So you don't call reload data too often, only if the data actually updated in the escaping closure. And the view did load. This reads the other way around. Okay, this is confusing because the first one, that is, if you just need to reorganize this. So it's better starting here for organization, start with declaration of the properties, constances that you have, and then comes the view controller lifecycle methods. And the first one that is called from these is the view did load. After this, the next one that is called from this is view will appear, and then view did appear. So make it in the order that they actually called. Personal preference here, maybe. Because then I just can read it in the normal flow and know which one is called in which direction. Okay, we have here first the setup of the collection view and the styling, the nav bar. This is here about radio. Set hides back button. Yes. This is because this is wrapped in the navigation view controller. You actually don't need to do this. That's why I was confused. Because you're using this from different positions in your app. Oh, you really should look into coordinator. Lefdili, please look into coordinators. This is going to be very useful for you. I see what you're trying to do. Because this selecting the country is used twice. Once when I launch my application the first time, I don't have anything. And the second time, when I'm here in settings. That's why now it's in a proper place. But you could still use your back button if it's in the normal stack. Now it pushes from a weird direction. That's a lot of things. Okay, so we have the collection view, register cells. We need to set up our collection view to have the correct cell identifiers. It's nice you have a custom cell. We have the header, background. I'm guessing this is not working in dark mode. Toggle appearance. Yes, it's a weird behavior in dark mode. Here, for example, in your assets, you can choose any in dark, and then you can choose a different color for the dark mode. For example, I just need to check what you used here. The collection view's background color is white. That's why this never changed to dark. Here. Do you have anything background related? Here, instead of white, use UIColor.system background. This should actually, system background should be white in light mode and dark in dark mode. So now if I'm in my selecting the country, the background is black, and I can toggle the appearance and it becomes white. It's just using system background colors makes it a lot easier for you to get directly dark mode. The other thing, just wanted to show you this small trick. Here, I guess it's the same in the radio list view controller. Here, table background color, I'm using alt, so UI color with the system background color. And I need to find the cells. Cell, register cell, separator color, tint color. This is the refresh control. I'm jumping to the radio list controller cell. And this is using this dark blue. Yes, that's actually quite good. So I can change in the color, this is the dark blue. And here, because I added this any in dark appearance, the dark one is probably here that's why I cannot read it, because the contrast is very low. So I'm making the dark version, which is the dark one, much lighter. So let's just go. And you see, it's actually very visible here. And also in this. I'm guessing you're using, I'm guessing these colors are different. So you can just add the same idea for these ones. And maybe you shouldn't, these signals that you used here, transparency, don't do that, because if your background is dark, it's also getting darker. So the opacity makes it harder for adapting for dark mode. I mean, this was not a main feature. Just keep on using this light and dark themes here. You can make it work in dark mode very fast. Okay, maybe I go back to appearance and country list view controller. Okay, maybe I have a look at the rest of this view controller. View did load. Then the second part is the flow layout delegate and the core data fetch request, working with core data and collection views. This is the typical number of sections. Cell for index path. Did select item add index path. This was one of the things that I wanted to know. Because here you're pushing to the radio list view controller. That's why it's pushing to the detail. The problem is you're adding here view controllers. Because you're pushing and pushing and pushing. And the problem is you're adding more and more view controllers. So now here I'm in my debug navigator, where you can have a look at the CPU and memory usage. So I'm just going to go and change countries a couple of times. Just adding more and more view controllers to the stack. And the main point is actually here, this memory build-up, because you keep on pushing and pushing more and more. I'm not really sure how easily you can actually crash your app if you do that multiple times. How long I need to do this to crash your app because you run out of memory. You can test this maybe also in instruments to see. See, I just created another one and my memory usage went up. And I created another one. The reason why you're having this problem is because you try to reuse this one view controller and you're putting it in two different positions, but then you cannot push from within this view controller because it would have two different effects. Maybe I should have looked in the view models and the data, because there's a lot more going on in this. Okay, the models. Okay, when I am in, let's just have a look what the core data shared fetch countries function does. It returns me the countries, getting the persistent containers view contests. I'm fetching for this entity countries. I can also reuse this function to search for a specific country. Just need to check if I actually can do this. I cannot search here for country names. Would be also nice to show the country name actually here in this view. You're using here do catch block, which is good because you're not crashing the app, but you're not doing anything with the arrows. That might be a good thing to try. Okay, we are getting here this countries. This is fetch countries. And here, down here there's a refresh data function. Update countries. Fetching them from the remote server. I wouldn't call this function from within the view controller here. Because this view controller doesn't need to know I have to call this twice. If you fetch these countries here and it's empty, it means the store is empty. You haven't actually fetched anything before. In this case, I would call, where is it? Fetch favorites, update countries. Or you can call this the first time the app launches. I'm not sure if you do. Okay, I'm using the update countries and the search. Then this is called one time the radio list controller and one time in the country list controller. If you can manage to store the data that you fetched in core data and then show the data from core data in your views, it's a very common thing that most apps do actually. So if you can demonstrate this working, that is great. But I still think you should call this in a different way. The view controller shouldn't call too many things. So here you have the core data manager shared, fetching the countries from store. If you cannot fetch them, if nothing is in the store, we should do another network request. Because maybe this is the first time we launched this. Which is when we should actually call update countries. Because here I do a network request. Network manager, so I go in here. So this is creating these fetches. I'm not sure if this has to be a shared instance. Because basically it's another layer where you can place all your network calls. So in these calls, you're using completion handlers. This is good, and you're continuing handling your URL, your errors, and the data itself. Right now, everything is just an error. I know error handling is not fun, and nobody likes to do it. But I'm also not sure if you actually show an error message to the user. Didn't see that. Actually, I wanted to. In the network request class, I wouldn't call this network request. It's probably your network data source because you're doing all these fetch requests. These fetches actually. You also don't handle the cases of decoding errors, but this JSON station JSON, this is from the server. You don't need to call this station JSON, because when you use it in your Swift code, it's not a JSON anymore, it's a Swift type. I'm guessing this is because in your data model you already have something that is for your core data that's called station. Okay, I actually paused this video for some time and went through your code to make this a little bit more organized. First, it's quite nice that there's view models there's different view models. What I don't like is that all of them are singletons, which you can see here from the static let shared. It's not necessary that everything is a singleton. This is overusing this pattern. So maybe decide if you can own it locally. Have a read through why singletons are not so good sometimes. The other thing that confused me personally quite a lot is I thought I'm using here Almofire. And yeah, I uncomment this and clear the build. And it turns out it's actually not using Almofire anywhere in the project, which means that it's unnecessary baggage. Because the more third-party libraries you have in your project, the longer it takes to build and the heavier is the build. So make sure to remove them if you don't need them anymore. Then it's a bit hard to understand where the data is coming from. And in this case, the information about the stations is coming from Firebase, which is imported here. And I had to find this out here because storage, this is Firebase storage, or the Google Cloud storage. So basically all of this, the list of all the stations must be in there. Fetch stations JSON. Station. Here the same fetch country data. Also accessing this from the cloud storage. Most of these names are quite descriptive of the function. That is good. I'm not really familiar with this cloud storage. In case where it's not so clear where the data is coming from, it's a good idea to write this down in the readme, what storage you're using and how you're accessing this, because this networking class gets the information about the countries and the stations from Firebase Cloud. And the AV player uses different things. So the media player to access this data, or to download this data, but it's also using some URL session here for getting the header information. I'm not really sure what that means. That could be a little bit more clear, because I'm guessing you're checking if you're allowed to record here. Yes, this is the function returning this allow recording, so maybe you can name this differently. Like check if recording for station is allowed. Then I had some problems with naming conventions. Let me just find this again. So, as an example, in the core data manager, at line A182, here, this is one of the functions that are network requests, fetch remote sources, returning the list of these countries. And what you get back is actually instances. In this case, it's an array. Jump remote sources is. Yes, you're returning here an array of this station information. And if it's an instance variable, if it's an instance, we shouldn't use here capital L list. It should be a small one, because this is capital ones are reserved for declaration of classes or structs. For example, my country is a struct error, so for types. So this should be changed. The other one here is list for each. I get confused because this is looking even more like Swift UI. But this is an instance, not a class function. And here in the closure, you're using an underbar list. Same here, underbar station. And here again, update countries, underbar countries. Usually, underbar is very rarely used in Swift. I think I had another example for this a little bit better in the player detail view. Yes, here. This is a class, the view that shows the player. And you have here some properties, for example, var underbar player. I'm guessing you want to highlight the fact that this is a private property. And if you want to declare something as private, don't use the underbar. You can set it here as private. You can also use private set if you want to. You didn't use hardly any, I think, of this private set, which might be worth having a look at. Here, this is also one of the situations where you're accessing the shared instance of your AV player singleton, and you're calling this locally now with a capital A, AV singleton. That doesn't describe what it is very well, and it should be a small letter. Just make it a little bit more descriptive, because the project is quite complicated, and I'm having a hard time getting through your code. Then, since I'm already here in this detail view of the player, just going to show the zip file next to it. This file is really, really long. It's like 600 lines, and it's not very consistent in what you have in this file. So I'm just, as an example, reorganizing this a little bit. So if it's long, you can split it up and add code in the extensions, not the properties, but functions. For example, scrolling, you can also add here, here's a file private. You can use mark gestures that I see in my mini map. That would be helping a little bit. So just more of these marks. So just going to move this gesture marker. Handle dismiss pen, set up gestures, awake from nip. So the problem is you should be a little bit consistent in where you put something, because down here I'm certainly having my outlets. But for example here, this awake from nip is a function that is called quite early, and you're putting it after a function which is handle interruption, handle next track, handle previous tag, so it's just buried. For example, this recording things you could move in a separate file. Okay, I'm just adding here another file. This is a Swift file. Player detail view, detail view plus recording. The plus is for an extension. So extension player detail view. It's going to import the same things as in the other file. I'm going to import here UIKit. And then, for example, I can move the handle record, generate record name, and start. Oh, maybe I'm just moving it next to it. Just need to get some space. So I'm moving handle record over there. Generate record name. Start record. Finish record. And save recording. Importing here AV player. AV kit. Just try if I protected this as private. You can also move the extension in the same file, but because I marked this here as private, if it's in the same file, I can use it as file private. Okay, this is working. Then here the station has a long did set. There's a lot of descriptions and uncommented things. So maybe this has to be cleaned up a little bit and organized. Then the last point is that I try to check for other memory leaks. So I'm just going to redo this. I was just testing with instruments a little bit to check if I can find leaks. So this is instruments with leaks. If I go for the sound and press multiple, sometimes stop and start again. So I'm not really sure. This red one is some leaks. Not really sure when that happens. I'm just looking for reference cycle issues. So don't use self if it's not needed. For example, here in this fetch country function, there's no need to reference self. Or in the search one. Or in the fetch stations one. And in the player detail view. Because the AV player singleton is using a lot of closures, escaping closures. There's a high chance that this is creating reference cycles. So for example here, this set image, you have to use self. You should use here weak self or unknown self. Same here for get header information with escape and closure. This should also use a unknown self because I'm here in this closure setting some of the properties. So for example, weak self question mark. So if it's, because it's then optional, trying to fix where this memory leak's coming from, but just having a look at all the escaping closure where self is used. As a summary for Lefdili, I would suggest having a look at some of the best practices for this fifth language, like naming conventions, private set, then maybe also when to use a singleton and when not, the alternatives. A little bit about reference cycle issues and the unowned and the weak self things to check. Maybe even have a look at instruments if you haven't done that before. Improving on the UI a little bit. I know that we're not supposed to judge a book by its cover, but unfortunately this is how it is if you're a front-end developer. But if your demo projects have a very good UI and UX, it shows that you care about these topics. And since iOS developer are front-end developer, we should all take some effort in making the UI look good and up to date. For example, the settings view, these buttons look a little bit out of date. Also the color schemes and the fonts, just making sure it's readable too. It's actually not so difficult to find design inspirations like on Dribbble. So for example, I was just looking for radio app. For example, this is a nice looking UI, so you can just copy or get inspired by some of the icons, the fonts, maybe the colors. You can just pick these color schemes. Having a good looking UI really makes a big difference. I only had to look at this one project, but it's a lot of projects from beginners are probably a lot simpler with less functionality. So this is more complex task to do, which obviously makes it harder to organize, but I think it's a good project to demo a lot of skills. I hope I motivated Lefdili to work on his projects and hopefully build on top of this so you can apply for jobs and get a job successfully. If you like this video and you want to see more, press the like button. If you haven't already, subscribe to my channel. If you want me to do more coding reviews, especially for portfolio projects, you can contact me either by contacting me in the comments or by sending an email. You can find my contact details in the description box. I myself went through this process and I don't want to say I'm an expert. I just want to share some informations. The other thing is also good for me to document and maybe keep track of some of the things that I want to memorize for later on. Just take what I say with a grain of salt. Only take the tips and recommendations that make sense for you. Go now and work on your portfolio projects. See you next time. Happy coding!